news information?
The only news that I can recall reading about this case since I filled out the questionnaire was awareness of the fact that jury selection was proceeding.
All right. In fact, I forgot to say, your voice is nice and strong, so it's not a problem, but we have plexiglass in front of you and between us, and also plexiglass in front of the attorneys. I'll keep my mask on, but if you wanted to remove your mask either for comfort or to speak more clearly, feel free to do so. I'm kind of leaving that in your hands. And even if you do remove it at some point, you can put it back on. It's totally up to you. But in any case, did you hear about any related cases, parties, lawsuits, anything like that since you filled out the questionnaire?
Not that I can recall.
Okay. The whole point of this being that just about everybody who has filled out the questionnaire has heard something about the case. Some of it might be accurate, some of it might not be, but we don't expect that you've not heard anything, or even that you have not formed an opinion. It's perfectly fine to form opinions based on what you've heard. What you have to do, however, if you're a juror, is to put all that aside. Decide this case just on the facts and just on the law that I give you. Some jurors will say, I can do that. Others will say, either A, I'm not the type of person who can do that, or I read so much and know so much and have been so firmly entrenched in my opinion that I can't be that person. So that's the whole point of asking the questions about what you know. At this point, do you think you could be fair and impartial?
I do.
Okay. Can you decide the case only on what you hear and see in the courtroom?
I believe so.
Okay. The lawyers are probably going to press you a little more on that. Let me ask you an easier question. Do you recognize any witnesses on the witness list?
No.
Okay. And this trial is going to be about 4 weeks long once we start on March 29th. Does that work for you, or can you make it work with your personal and professional life?
Would I be expected to sequester during that time?
It's a possibility. We're not planning on it during the trial. Definitely sequestered during deliberations.
Understood.
Okay, possibly during trial, but that's not the plan. But if things happen that we have to, we have to.
I believe I could.
Okay. Then I'm going to find under the rules that there are items on your questionnaire that require more private conversation. So what I'm going to do at this time is, under the rules, find that these are deeply personal items that need discussion off audio. So we will go off the audio. Nelson to ask some questions.
Afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask you a few questions just to kind of get to know you a little bit better, and then I'm going to focus on some of your responses to the questionnaire, okay?
Understood.
I'm not trying to trick you or anything of that nature. I'll obviously read what you wrote for purposes of your recollection as well as the record, okay?
Understood.
All right, so let's assume you and I were to meet in a different circumstance. We met at a party or some social event, and we strike up a conversation. What are a couple of things I'm going to learn about you during that conversation?
Likely that my job, I work as an IT systems administrator, and my love of tabletop games.
Okay, great. When you received, you obviously had heard about this case beforehand, right? Before you knew you were a potential juror.
Yes.
And I think based on your questionnaire, you followed it quite closely. You and your friends followed it quite closely.
Yes.
All right. And then you received this packet of information in the mail, and you learned that you were a potential juror on this case. What was your first response to that?
A deep breath, running my hands through my hair, and swearing quietly.
Okay. Why that response? I mean,
This is a very high-profile case, one where being involved in it at all, even as a potential juror, has made me feel somewhat concerned for my well-being, and because the idea of being involved in a high-profile case like this is a daunting responsibility.
okay. So what about your personal safety? I mean, why were you concerned about your personal safety?
Because, with all due respect to this court and its proceedings, I assume that my identity is stored in some electronic record somewhere, and from my job I know that no electronic record is completely safe. And frankly, I feel that whichever way this case is decided, a lot of people are going to be very angry about that.
Okay. Is there one verdict? There's two possible verdicts, right? Guilty or not guilty. Is there one verdict that you think would draw a more a response that would put your safety in greater jeopardy?
Yes.
Would you would that concern or that fear affect your ability to reach that verdict?
No.
Okay. So, I believe based on your answers from your questionnaire that you would be more concerned that if there was a guilty verdict of who may present you with harm.
Can you clarify the question,
Sure.
please?
Based on your answers in the questionnaire, which we'll talk about in a little bit, I believe that you feel that if you were to convict Mr. Chauvin of these offenses, the likelihood of harm is greater.
Yes.
Okay. So from people who might support Mr. Chauvin, they would present you with a greater risk.
Yes.
And so my question is, sitting here right now, can you foresee yourself voting not guilty?
Voting not guilty? Yes.
Okay. So you understand that that's a possibility.
Yes.
And guilty is a possibility as well.
Yes.
And so your concern, let me ask you this, when you got to the government center this morning or earlier today and you saw the fortifications and the army and all of that stuff, what was your reaction to that?
I felt very nervous, even as someone who I knew was required by law to be here. I felt very nervous passing through that.
Okay. Did you feel in any way safer, or did it make you more concerned about your physical safety?
In one respect, I felt safer because I knew I wouldn't need to worry about the possibility of some unforeseen actor coming in from the outside and disrupting things. On the other hand, it makes me feel a little more concerned simply on the grounds that it makes me feel that clearly the government feels all these precautions are necessary.
Okay. And you may disagree with the necessity of these precautions?
I think the precautions are probably. I understand I understand why the government chose to put these precautions in place. I do not necessarily disagree with that necessity. It's just that it implies to me that there was some reason they believed why it was necessary.
Okay. When you heard that we're doing everything we can to preserve your anonymity, did that alleviate any of your concerns?
Yes.
Now, at some point, when the judge deems it safe to do so, do you understand that your identity could be released?
Yes.
And we don't know when that is. The court will determine that when it's safe. Does that cause you concern?
It does cause me concern, yes.
And for the same reasons you stated before?
Yes.
Essentially, that if you were to find Mr. Chauvin guilty, you may become a target yourself.
Yes.
So the back to the original question is, if you were deliberating in this case, would you be able to set aside your concerns, analyze the evidence based on what comes in during court, and issue a verdict based on the law and the evidence?
Yes, I would.
In your personal or professional life, can you think of a circumstance where you've been called upon to resolve conflict?
Give me a minute while I think. Yes, I can think of a couple such cases.
All right. So when you're tasked with that, how do you approach that process? How do you resolve conflict between two people?
Generally, the way I would resolve conflict between people would be to try to find common ground, try to cool tempers, or to make sure that my first goal would be to try to clear up any misunderstandings and then to establish common ground between the parties who are in conflict, to break up tension by lightening the mood.
Okay. So you understand that this case is fraught with conflict. Do you understand that?
Yes.
And it's obviously in a broad sense, it's the state of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin. You understand that?
Yes.
And that's ultimately a conflict that you're going to have to, if you sit on this jury, resolve.
Yes.
But in the more immediate sense, if you were a juror on this case, you would be in the deliberation room, and conflict between two people or conflict involving yourself may arise. Do you think that there's a difference in how you approach conflict if you're a member or a participant in the conflict versus an outside observer being asked to resolve that conflict?
Yes, there is.
And what is that difference?
External conflict, I find it's much easier to approach with perhaps a critical or dispassionate eye. As I explained, internal conflict, with an external conflict, I tend to try to remain impartial. With internal conflict, that's generally not an option to the same degree.
Okay.
So I have to weigh which side of the conflict I find more compelling.
Are you willing to re-examine your position based on the input of others?
Yes.
Are you willing to stand your ground if you're so convinced that you're right?
Yes.
Can you think of a situation in your life where you've been confident that you were 100% correct, only to later learn that you were wrong?
Absolutely.
And how do you approach that?
I try to approach it with good grace. In my hobbies, doing design work, I often find that my initial intuitions, the way I've described it to friends and colleagues is, I will be absolutely convinced I am right. You will tell me I am wrong, and 48 hours later, I will tell you that you were correct the whole time, and I don't see how I could have ever believed otherwise.
Okay, fair enough. Now, ultimately, again, if you were a juror in this case, the judge is going to tell you what the law is at the end. You have to decide the facts of the case and how the law applies to the facts as you decide it. You may read the law and you may disagree with the judge. You may think that can't be right, or you may think we really need to change this law. Can you apply the law to the facts of this case based upon the evidence presented in this court alone, even if you think the law is wrong or should be changed?
Yes, that's the responsibility of a juror.
So I'm going to ask you a few follow-up questions on your questionnaire, sir. Again, everybody who's been here has been exposed to this case to varying degrees, and so we're not questioning that at this point. All right. But ultimately, we have to decide if you are the right juror for this particular case. All right. So you were asked a series of questions about, or there were some questions about a video that went viral and became news. And you said you've never seen this video.
That's correct.
All right. Have you seen any parts of this video on news or still photos of this video? Anything about this video that you've ever been exposed to?
I believe I've seen still photos of it.
Okay. Like on internet news websites and things of that nature?
Yes.
But you have never watched any portion of this video?
Correct.
All right. So would you agree with the general premise that words have meaning?
Yes.
Would you agree that sometimes the words we choose to use are reflective of our thoughts, opinions, or beliefs?
Yes.
All right. You were asked to describe what you had heard about this statement, and you wrote, George Floyd was a black man accused of passing a counterfeit bill to purchase cigarettes. He was accosted by the police, and after an argument was pinned to the ground. Chauvin placed his knee on Floyd's neck and kept it there for over 8 minutes while Floyd protested that he could not breathe. That's the first part of what you wrote. Why did you choose the word accosted?
I don't know off the top of my head why I wrote that at that time. Thinking about that choice of words now, I don't know I can give you a definitive answer.
Okay. I mean, would you agree that the word accosted infers an evil intent?
Most likely, yes.
You wrote that despite Floyd's pleas, which stopped after he lost consciousness, approximately 5 minutes in, Chauvin continued to pin Floyd to the ground until someone pointed out to him that Floyd was dead. And you've just gleaned this from news articles and conversations with friends, correct?
Yes.
Not watched the video.
Correct.
You were asked about your impression of Mr. Chauvin. and you checked the box very negative, and when asked, when asked why, you wrote, I do not see how an officer could justify causing the death of a nonviolent alleged criminal well after he ceased to pose any credible threat. Remember writing that?
Yes.
Okay. So let's talk about that. First and foremost, you have formed an impression that a very negative impression of Mr. Chauvin.
Yes.
And you have formed the impression that Mr. Chauvin caused Mr. Floyd's death.
Yes.
And you formed an impression, at least as it relates to Mr. Chauvin, that Mr. Floyd was a nonviolent alleged criminal.
Yes.
Now, with respect to Mr. Floyd and your general impression of Mr. Floyd, you wrote, as I understand, Floyd was not a threat, and his alleged wrongdoings certainly did not merit the use of lethal force. That's what you wrote. So, again, you have formed an opinion or an impression that the force that was used in this case was lethal.
Yes.
When asked about your conversations with family, friends, or coworkers, or whether you've posted anything online, you checked yes. Let me ask you first, have you posted any opinions online?
Regarding this case?
Yes.
No, I have not.
But what you have expressed to your friends, you have expressed a sympathy with the protesters and their cause, and have discussed the militarization and systematic racism of policing in America.
Yes.
So, again, you have... Your opinions are your opinions, and I do not invalidate your opinions by my questions. I'm trying not to invalidate your opinions by my questions. But obviously, you have formed strong opinions about this case. Agreed?
Yes.
You have formed an opinion that Mr. Chauvin caused Mr. Floyd's death.
Yes.
You have formed an opinion that the amount of force that Mr. Chauvin used against Mr. Floyd was in and of itself lethal force.
Yes.
You have an opinion that policing in America is systematic racism, or involves or incorporates systematic racism and an over-militarization of the modern police force.
Yes.
So your views are strong. Agreed?
Yes.
There's what's called the presumption of innocence. You're familiar with that?
Yes.
Right? You understand that Mr. Chauvin does not have to testify.
Yes.
You understand that Mr. Chauvin is not required to present a single shred of evidence in this case.
Yes.
You understand that we don't have to ask a single question.
Yes.
And at the starting point, right? The starting point is Mr. Chauvin is presumed innocent.
Yes.
So my concern, and you believe that you can be fair and impartial in this case.
I do.
Okay. So you've got these strong opinions,
Yes.
right? You can set all of those opinions aside, right? Your beliefs about policing, the cause of death, the use of force, all of those things that you've already decided and formed opinions on, you can set them to the side and be fair and impartial.
May I clarify rather than giving a simple yes or no?
Sure, please do.
The issue at my role as a potential juror in this case is to be a potential trier of fact. My moral judgments, as I was asked before, regarding the law and the nature of policing are not relevant to the question of fact in the eyes of the law, which would be my responsibility as a juror.
Okay. So, despite all of that, right? I mean, you have you watch certain pieces of evidence in this particular case, or you learn about certain training methods of the Minneapolis Police Department, or you learn certain medical information, right? That's the evidence that comes in this case. You would just simply abandon your beliefs about the over-militarization of the police when you see training videos of them pinning people to the ground or whatever. You don't think it shapes your ability to impartially try this case?
Again, I don't believe that it would necessarily affect my core convictions, but again, my opinions of what the law is and of what the system of policing in this nation is are not relevant to the question of whether the prosecution proves beyond a reasonable doubt whether the defendant has committed the crime of which he is accused.
In the questionnaire, you were asked to rank your opinions up to various kind of broad or blanket type statements, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you recall that exercise in this questionnaire?
Vaguely, yes.
So I want to just cover a couple of your opinions on these. The statement reads, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you strongly disagreed with that notion. Can you explain that?
I believe that racial discrimination, for example, is a serious problem in this country. That we see examples of this in the media, but I don't know if I would say it's necessarily worse than the media. Than the media. Makes it out to be.
Near water.
But I believe that they're certainly not underplaying it.
The statement reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you strongly agreed with that.
That's correct.
And is that based on personal knowledge, talking with friends, studies? Like, what leads you to the belief that you would strongly agree with the notion that minorities do not receive equal treatment?
That's based on reports that I've read in the media, discussions of studies of prison populations, of sentencing for drug offenses, for example, the difference in how neighborhoods with various ethnic compositions are policed, and so on.
The statement says, police in this country treat whites and blacks equally, and you strongly disagreed with that.
Yes.
So let me put it to you this way. Simply because a police officer pulls over a minority person, is that discrimination?
Not in and of itself, no.
But it's your position that it happens more to minorities simply by virtue of a discriminatory act.
Yes, or that the likely outcomes are likely to be worse.
So that that if you are a minority, you have a higher likelihood of it ending tragically.
Yes.
And the question reads, or the statement reads, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat disagreed with that. Why?
Well, mostly in light of everything that's been going on surrounding this case and related events. Also, simply the fact that to be perfectly blunt, I'm always a little wary of anyone with guns being in my general vicinity.
Okay. The question or statement reads, I do not trust the police, and you strongly agree with that.
That's correct.
So you understand that there's going to be a lot of police officers that testify in this case.
Yes.
You understand that the majority of those people who testify will be called by the government.
Yes.
And so when you say you mistrust or do not trust the police, and that you strongly agree with that proposition, can you take the word of a police officer who testifies under oath in this case?
No, I cannot.
Would the court like to inquire further?
Mr. Swisher, would you like to inquire?
Yes, sir. It's upside down. Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Sir, I'd like to follow up on that line of questioning. You've indicated that you have a fairly strong mistrust of the police. True?
Yes.
But if you could imagine a situation where you have a police officer testifying to an event, not necessarily an opinion, but an event, like the light was green, versus a bystander testifying as to the same event, and let's say the bystander says the light was red. Now, solely based on the person being a police officer versus a bystander, do you think that you would tend to believe the police officer more or less simply because they're a police officer?
It would depend on what the circumstances were.
And what would some of those circumstances be?
If, for example, to invert your example, if a police officer were to say that the light had been red when another police officer had pulled someone over and a bystander said the light was green, therefore, if the second police officer who were testifying this were covering for the first police officer by saying that the light was red, I would be more inclined to trust the bystander. If it were an issue where the fact that they were a police officer was incidental, I don't believe it would color my judgment one way or the other.
And let's say it's just simply the example of the police officer versus the bystander, but the police officer was standing 5 feet away from the light. The bystander was standing back, 100 feet from the light. Would you tend to believe the police officer or the bystander?
Again, it would depend somewhat on the circumstances, but I think I'd be more inclined to believe the police officer in that circumstance.
And why is that?
Because they were closer to the event. They were at the heart of it. It's much less possible that they could have been innocently mistaken.
And so it sounds like from your answer, it would depend on the circumstances, not necessarily that the person was a police officer or not a police officer, but it would be based upon, say, their opportunity to see the event?
That would be a big part of it, yes.
There may be other factors unrelated to there being a police officer that would cause you to favor one witness over another?
Yes.
And the real question here is, if you were called and selected to be a juror in this case, would you honestly, in all honesty, be able to set aside any preconceived bias you have about any occupation, a police officer or not a police officer, and judge the case solely based on the evidence and not on your preconceived notions? Would you be able to do that, or would you struggle with it?
I would attempt to judge the case as best I was able based on the evidence. However, I believe part of the instructions I was given were that it would be my role to judge which evidence was most credible, and it would factor into my weighting of evidence in that regard.
And so if following the instructions and you knew that you had to make a credibility determination, do you believe that you would not be able to set aside some opinions that you hold about police officers and judge their testimony on the same level as any other witness? You would not be able to do that?
I do not believe I would be able to do so. That's correct.
Okay. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Juror 90, I'm going to excuse you from this panel. The deputy will take some paperwork from you, but thank you for all your very candid answers here and also for filling out the questionnaire. We appreciate your service. You won't be called in on any other cases, so you are removed from jury service completely.
Understood.
Any
Thank you,
questions?
Your Honor.
All right,
No.
take that. Have a good day. This will be juror 91, first one of the afternoon. We have to do all four, yeah.
For the record, I was making a motion for cause.
Yeah, the motion was implied for cause. I think he clearly fell within the case law and police credibility. The reverse of Logan, essentially. All right, this is the group advisory again. And then number 91. Off the record, Mr. Slisher, I was assuming that you would. Hey, good. You can be seated. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. I'll also be asking you some questions. If the answer is yes, just raise your hand, but we'll get to that. First of all, my name is Pete Cahill, and I'm one of the judges of the district court. And you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to a fair trial before an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all the prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First, thank you for filling out and returning the questionnaire in the mail. We appreciate the information that kind of gives us a good head start. But your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by your continuing to provide full, complete, and honest answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. And as I said, those questions are going to be under oath. Now, the questions you're going to be asked are probably going to follow up on some items in the questionnaire. So after the questioning is over, the attorneys may excuse you from the jury, and I might excuse you for what we call cause. In either case, it does not mean that you're not a fair person, and you should not take offense in being excused. Also ask that you not take any offense at any question that is asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore some opinions you might hold and to hear about some of your experiences that might affect your ability to serve in this case. Now, the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of a trial, charges might be added to or subtracted from those charges, but those are the charges as it stands today. To the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. And I'm now going to have the participants introduce themselves, the purpose being to see if you have any acquaintance or friendship with them or professional relationship. So, beginning with the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon. My name is Steve Slisher, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Hello, my name is Christina Marinakis, and I'm assisting with the prosecution.
If you'd introduce your client.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Nelson. Along with my associate, Amy Voss, we represent the defendant, Derek Chauvin.
Does anybody on the panel recognize any of those people or have a relationship with any of those people? If so, raise your hand. All right, juror in the corner. What is your juror number? 9-1. Okay. Who is it that you know?
I don't know. I just know the name.
Okay. So is this something that you know that you've seen some of these people before, maybe on the news or something?
Yes.
And you're indicating yes. Okay, I think we'll get to that in individual questioning then. Anybody else? Anybody know other members of the Attorney General's office who might be present in the case, specifically Matthew Frank or Jerry Blackwell or anybody else who works in the office of the Attorney General? Okay. Anybody who knows anybody who works with Mr. Nelson in his law firm or had any business dealings with his office? Okay. You have been given a copy of a list of potential witnesses. I'd like you to review it before you're questioned individually. You'll be asked if you know anyone on that list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do in jury selection is to instruct you on the law. But I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. If you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given a witness's testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect. In determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, the relationship to the parties, ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, manner, age and experience, frankness and sincerity or the lack thereof, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your experience, good judgment, and common sense. There are certain things that you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigative. You are not to go out and do any looking, and you're not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved, the lawyers or the witnesses or spectators. Do not be offended if any of those people do not speak to you. They know it would be improper to contact you during the trial, except through the normal selection process, and generally will confine themselves to a brief greeting. During the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them that you are on a panel of potential jurors in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during these proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror in this case or to comment on this trial. You may access such social media tools, avoiding news articles, I hope, but please Do not publish any information about the case or your thoughts about the case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and do not talk at all to anyone involved in it. Because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about the case in the newspapers or online or in social media, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. Now, this trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast, unless we need to discuss something that is deeply personal, extremely sensitive, embarrassing, or would tend to specifically identify you. In those cases, I will specifically order the audio to not be broadcast. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast. Essentially, only the audio could be heard by people that are in this courtroom. Now, with the exception of juror number 91, I'm going to have the rest of you wait in the other courtroom. Feel free to use all the hand sanitizers and sanitary wipes you wish. We're trying to maintain COVID protections, so please keep your masks on and distance. I took my mask off just so you could hear me on this. I'll be returned to wearing it when you are individually questioned. So with that, except for juror number 91, if you could go with the deputy. Sure. Hold on just a second. Okay, juror 91, if you could come on up here. Just have a seat right there. All right, I'm going to start with a few things. Number one, I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. You raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Yes.
All right. First question. You filled out a questionnaire, gave us a lot of good information to start with. Is everything on the questionnaire true?
Yes, it is.
All right. Any changes or additions to the questionnaire?
No, sir.
Okay. And that's a very broad question, but we understand, in fact, it's been very common for the jurors who come here today and in the other days we've been in selection, that in the intervening months they reflect and they realize maybe there's some things I should have changed or added to, or maybe even some opinions have evolved. And so they want to give a different answer. Just want you to be comfortable with the fact giving a different answer than what was in the questionnaire is absolutely fine. If it's the honest answer, full, complete answer, that's what we want, even if it's different. So you have explicit permission to say things other than what's in the questionnaire and to be different from it. This is more likely to come up actually when the lawyers ask you questions, because they will direct you to specific questions and maybe ask about your answer several months ago. They are likely to read both the question and answer to refresh your recollection. They're not trying to be confrontational or to imply anything about your answer, just so that you can kind of remember what your answer was. Because you don't have a copy of your questionnaire, do you?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do? You are number 2 of all the jurors who've kept a copy of their questionnaire. Congratulations. So in any case, they might still read it to you just so that you can refresh recollection.
Okay.
You weren't supposed to read any articles. The questionnaire advised you against any following any media coverage about the case, but we realize it's been fairly prevalent in the media, and it's been several months. Have you become aware of any information about the case or related cases since you filled out the questionnaire till today?
Just the announcement of the settlement.
Okay, and what specific details do you recall from that?
Just the number 27 million, I think it was. I don't know what
Okay,
it was.
I'm going to ask you to pull a little closer to the microphone, only because
Just the amount of the settlement. I
Okay.
didn't read any details, just
Right, just the headline, right?
just the headline, yes.
And they put the amount in the headline. Do you recall what the amount was?
I think it was 27 million, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken.
All right, great. One other thing is, we have plexiglass between us, plexiglass in front of you, plexiglass in front of where the lawyers are going to ask you questions. I only point all that out, and I'm going to keep my mask on. Just to give you permission, if you wish, with all those protections, it's permissible that you take your mask off if you want. Yes. Totally your... Okay. Didn't take a lot of convincing. Yeah, if you ever want to put it back on, feel free. I kind of leave the mask or unmask up to the individual juror.
Sure, thank you.
All right. Any other items you may have heard about in the media?
No.
Okay. Let me talk about that settlement then. I think you indicated in your questionnaire you could be fair and impartial in this case.
Absolutely.
Now, when you've heard about that settlement after you filled out the questionnaire, has that moved the needle for you? Do you think it would well, now I think I might not be impartial. I might be leaning one way versus the other. What do you think?
Not at all. It hasn't changed.
Okay.
No.
What effect do you think it had on your decision, if you have one as a juror in this case?
I don't think it had any effect, 'cause once again, I just don't have any details.
Okay. And if it doesn't come into evidence, which it won't, it's not part of this case. Different parties, different issues, different decisions to be made. All those are different and they aren't part of this case. Can you put aside what you've heard about that in deciding this case?
Absolutely.
And really it comes down to everything you've heard about this case. Everybody's heard something. And the question is, can you put everything you've heard aside? You know, some of it's accurate, some of it's not accurate. But can you put it all aside and put aside any opinions you may have formed and decide this case just on what you hear in the courtroom based on the evidence and the law that I give you?
I believe that I can, yes, sir.
Okay. Excellent. Did you recognize any witnesses on the witness list?
None.
Okay. And we have a trial that's going to be about 4 weeks long. Do you think that you can make that work for your personal and professional life?
I will make it work.
Okay. We understand it is burdensome the longer a trial gets on everybody's life, but you think you can make it work?
I can make it work, yes. It's a challenge, but it's workable.
Yeah, and I think I've stopped asking people, is that okay? Because, well, in some ways, no. But I'm glad you can make it work. There's something I want to ask you about, but to get to the specifics, it may involve leading to information that might identify you specifically. Basically, you know someone in the Minneapolis Police Department, is that correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Would you mind if I gave you a pen and paper, if you wrote down that name so I can share it with the lawyers without the world hearing who that person is?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Who's dinging, by the way? Who's dinging?
Me.
Okay. As long as I know who it is. You're allowed. They aren't. Okay. I'm going to have my clerk share this with the lawyers so that we don't have to say it on the record. part of the reason we're doing this is if you identify the person, that might make it easier to identify you. And we are doing everything we can to protect your anonymity.
I appreciate that.
Now, when they talk about the relationship and how often you talk to that person, please feel free to, in fact, I'd encourage you to be general. Because if, for example, if you give enough detail that someone can figure out who that person is, again, it's too close, it might come back at you. So with that, when the lawyers are there, and I'll ask this question while they're conferring. That person's name was not on the witness list, am I correct?
It was not.
Okay, great. All right, then as I'm going to turn it over to the attorney, so as to juror number 91, Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your patience. Sorry, I got to adjust after taking off the mask. I have a few questions for you generally that I'd like to just get to know you a little bit better. And then from there, I'm going to follow up and ask you some questions about your responses to the questionnaire. Would that be all right with you?
Yes.
All right. So if you and I were to meet under different circumstances, a more casual conversation occurs, it's our first conversation, what are a couple things I learn about you after I walk away from that conversation?
You would learn that I'm a grandmother.
Congratulations.
A couple of grandchildren. And I enjoy taking care of my family.
Okay. Do you get to spend a lot of time with your grandkids?
Absolutely.
Great. You had obviously heard about this case before learning that you were going to be a potential juror, right?
Yes.
And had conversations, maybe saw some things on the news, right?
Right.
What was your impression when you received this packet of information and you were identified as a potential juror on this case?
What was my impression?
Yeah. What was your reaction?
My reaction? I guess I was kind of excited to possibly have an opportunity. Never served on a jury before. I feel strongly about it being my civic duty to do so. And so when I received the information, I was proud to complete the questionnaire and send it back.
Okay. So exciting to fulfill your civic duty, and especially on a high-profile case. Or
I didn't really think of it as a high-profile case, just to fulfill my civic duty.
okay,
Have that opportunity, yes.
fair enough. Did you have several jurors have said that they had some concerns about their personal safety, physical safety, COVID? Did you share any of those types of concerns?
First, the only concern I really had was COVID. But since I had been vaccinated, and there's a year behind us, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable. I'm getting into the routine of keeping this mask on hand and social distancing, so I have no concerns at this point.
Okay, great. I'm jealous of your vaccination. When you got to the government center today, have you been downtown since preparations for this trial started?
I have not been downtown in years.
Oh, okay. When you got down here today, however, what was your kind of reaction to the fortifications, the military, the fencing, all of that stuff?
Frustration, because I circled the block about 5 times trying to figure out how to get in, because it wasn't the same as it used to be.
Right.
And it looked like construction going on. And as I drove by slowly for the 5th time, I kind of saw through the fence an armed guard. And so I slowed down, and he very nicely pointed me in the direction and actually walked while I drove. And there was a magic gate that opened, so I was afraid I wasn't going to make it on time because I couldn't figure out where to park. Yeah.
Excellent. Again, I don't think you're alone in that experience.
Yeah, it was quite an experience.
So Can you think of a time in your life where you have been called upon to be to resolve a conflict between people? You have kids, grandkids, professionally. Can you think about a time like that?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So when you think about the word conflict, it generally, would you agree, involves two other people or two or more people, perhaps?
Generally, yes.
Okay. Do you think it's different if you are personally involved in a conflict versus simply being asked to observe a conflict or resolve a conflict?
I suppose it could be different. Yeah.
Okay. So how do you approach a situation where you are being asked to resolve a conflict between two people?
I am being asked to resolve a conflict between. Okay. And what's the question again?
What tools, how do you approach that? What's your methodology involved in resolving conflict between two other people?
Two sides of the story. I need to hear both, get all the information, the details, the facts, the feelings, and then proceed accordingly.
Okay. How do you think it changes if you're one of the people involved in the conflict?
If I'm one of the people involved, once again, I need to think about the facts. Try to think about how I can resolve the conflict if I did anything that really helped fuel the conflict, and how I might help resolve it.
Okay. So you understand that the role of a juror is essentially about conflict resolution.
Yes.
And obviously there's a conflict between the state of Minnesota on one hand and Derek Chauvin on the other hand. That's the global conflict, right? But then if you were selected as a juror in this case and you're in the jury deliberation room, you may be involved in conflict yourself, or you may be called upon to help resolve conflict between others. Do you think that you can apply those same principles in the jury room?
Absolutely. I feel like I do it every day with 2 grandkids.
Yeah, those grandkids will do it to you. But now let's take a kind of a really broad abstract, right? You understand there will be lots of evidence that's introduced in this case. We're expecting this case to take 4 weeks, roughly. People will testify, and some people will remember or perceive things differently than you remember or perceive things, right?
Right.
So what tools do you bring to kind of that analysis to say, how do we figure out a just result here?
The facts. Go back to the facts. What was presented, what happened, and exactly what are the facts.
Okay.
It has to be based on the facts, yeah.
All right. Wonderful. I'm going to venture a guess that perhaps with your grandchildren this may have also come up, but do they ever lie to you?
Oh, yes.
How do you tell if someone is telling you the truth?
Well, they're pretty young, so you can usually tell. But
Right.
For the older one, just look her in the eye. Let her know that I know that she's not being forthcoming. And, it's not appreciated, and it's good to be forthcoming.
Okay. So in terms of, can you think of a situation you've got 2 people who may perceive an event at the same time, right? Do you think that, and they have 2 completely different stories about that event, do you think that that automatically means that one or the other is lying?
No, I don't.
Okay.
I think their perception is their truth. So we just have to work harder at getting to the common truth.
And I know you have a background in psychology, right? So the question being, if 2 people are perceiving the same event, what types of things would you think affect their perception of that? Might affect their perception of that event?
Possibly experiences they've had in the past. Any moral thoughts or moral things that they feel or convictions that they have possibly could affect it.
Okay. What about a particularized training or lack of particularized training?
I'm sure that could influence it also.
Right.
Absolutely.
So perhaps a medical doctor will look at a situation, someone having a medical emergency, differently than a nurse. They both have a medical education, right? Would you agree with that?
They both have a medical education, basic, yes.
And they may perceive something differently despite having medical education, right?
Yes.
And one person who has a lot of training in something may perceive it much differently than someone who has no training. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. And do you think that again, is necessarily that one or the other is lying about what they perceive?
No.
Okay. Can you think of a situation where you've been 100% convinced that you're right, only to later learn you were wrong?
All the time with my husband.
It's usually the husband saying that about the wives, right? How do you approach that? I mean, what do you other than apologizing to your husband, or maybe not apologizing? I don't know.
Usually an apology and providing the evidence of, why he was right and I was incorrect.
Okay. So you can take what you learn and apply it to future situations?
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you one more question about the deliberation room. Are you the type of person who will simply agree with someone else just to build consensus, or will you dig your heels in, stand your ground?
Normally I would pretty much dig my heels in, stand my ground, try to make sure my opinion and my point of view is heard until someone can dismantle it.
Okay. Now, last general question, which is, at the end of the case and when all the evidence is presented, the judge will instruct you on the law. And you may read the law and you may go, that's wrong, or I think that should be different. You may disagree with the law. Can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you based upon the facts as presented in court, even if you think it's wrong or should be changed?
Yes, that would be my duty, yes.
Okay, fair enough. So I'm just going to follow up with a few questions for you, ma'am, on your questionnaire. I, again, appreciate you taking the time to fill this out and the thoroughness of your answers. Again, you were asked a few questions, and I believe you indicated that you had seen a video on the internet of the interaction between Minneapolis Police Department and George Floyd, right?
Correct.
And I think you said that you had checked the box that you had seen that video one time.
That is correct.
And I'm going to ask you, I want to make sure we're kind of talking about the same video. It's a video that was taken by a bystander. It got uploaded into social media and then went viral, became a news story. Is that the video that you saw?
Correct, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
And there were also some body-worn cameras or some security cameras that were introduced into the public sector. Did you see any of those?
No, I did not.
Okay. And so I think we're probably talking about the same video, which is a video taken by someone watching or observing the arrest.
Correct.
All right. And when you say you watched that one time, did you watch it in long form, or did you see like a clip of it on the news?
Didn't see it on the news. I guess it would be in long form, maybe, if I'm understanding what long form is.
Well, a longer, X number of minutes, not 30 seconds or a minute or 40 seconds. I mean, longer than, let's say, 5 minutes.
I think I probably watched it for about 4 to 5 minutes.
Okay. And is there a reason, did someone send that to you? Did you see it on social media? If you didn't see it on the news, how did you come about that video?
It popped up on social media, I believe.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And did you, is there a reason, did you shut it off mid-video?
I did.
Why?
It just wasn't something that I needed to see. As I shut off quite a few things you know, in the news. I seldom watch the news.
Okay, great. You were asked a series of questions about your impression or your general impression of Mr. Chauvin as well as Mr. Floyd. And your opinion as to both of them was neutral. You wrote with respect to Mr. Chauvin that there are two sides to every story and I don't know all of the details. I don't want to misquote you. Why do you think, are there specific details you think you're missing? Why do you think that there's more to know about this story?
Because I just don't know. I don't know what I don't know. There's a video, there's rioting in the city, and, you know, I just know the surface.
Okay.
I don't know anything other than that. I don't know.
Would you think it's important to get more information before you could make a decision?
I think more information would be very helpful.
You were asked about Mr. Floyd, and again, you said, I don't know him, and I don't have an opinion of him one way or the other. Are there things that that you would learn that may change your opinion of him? Not that his character is of relevance, but...
I don't think so, no.
Okay. You were asked about whether you've had conversations with friends, family members, coworkers, or discussed Mr. Floyd's death on social media. Did you ever post anything on social media about this case?
No, I did not.
Okay. But you said you discussed it with your family right after it happened. We talked about how the incident happened in the neighborhood you grew up in. So you must have grown up in Southeast Minneapolis, I'm assuming?
In South Minneapolis, yes.
South Minneapolis, okay. And you were asked a question of whether you believe your community was negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area since George Floyd's death. And you wrote, yes, my community has been affected.
Yes.
How has it been affected?
It's been affected by the fact that so many stores were looted, you know, and destroyed. I have a brother that has medication sent through the post office, and a few days later he called and said, you know, they were in the post office, how am I going to get my medication? So things like that.
Okay. Do you think there were any positive impacts as a result of the protests?
I think some people may have come together and helped each other or helped businesses get back on their feet. Helping people that can't get their medicine, people that need food, things like that.
Okay.
Those are the positive things that I feel took place.
So I'll just ask you kind of a common theme that's emerged in terms of this discussion is there a difference between a protest and a riot?
I think there is.
Okay. How would you define the difference?
I think a protest, you're actually protesting against something that you strongly believe in. A riot, I believe, is an intent to harm and destroy, and possibly not listen or see. Yeah.
So in terms of the protests versus the riots, right? I think you've described that your brother had some problems with his medication, and that was a negative impact to the community. And then when you describe people coming together and helping, is that more associated with the protests, or is that simply kind of trying to clean up after the riots?
A tricky question. I think it's more associated with the protest.
Okay. And that's positive. That has had a positive impact on the community.
Yes.
Okay. Now you have a relative who is a Minneapolis police officer, right?
Yes, I do.
Have you spoken with your relative about this case at all?
No, I have not.
Even before you were summoned as a juror?
No.
Okay. Do you talk to your relative frequently?
No, I do not.
I mean, are you close with him or her?
No.
So you haven't seen, I mean, do you see them maybe once a year or just haven't seen them even in years?
Well, I see this person, this relative, maybe, I would say 4 times a year, maybe 5.
Okay. So you're in contact, but you're not super close.
Exactly.
Have you ever spoken with him or her about his or her job?
No.
Okay. They've never described, this is kind of what it's like doing this job.
No.
If you were to be a juror on this case, and the policies and training of the Minneapolis Police Department or aspects of the police department were the subject of this trial, right, which is probably the proper subject of the trial, would you call this person up and say, hey, this is what they're telling me is going on, and should I believe this?
No.
Okay. Does the fact that you have a relative in the Minneapolis Police Department specifically, given that this case involves the MPD, does it specifically cause you to have bias for or against either party in this case?
It does not. I'm really proud of my relative for standing up and being a police officer.
Good. You were asked a series of questions, statements. They were actually more or less just kind of statements, right? And you were asked to rank your agreement or disagreement with them on a scale of strongly agree over to strongly disagree. Again, do you generally remember those, or remember doing that or engaging in that exercise?
It's been a while. I genuinely.
Yeah. And you did keep a copy, I forgot.
Yes,
right?
I do have a copy right here.
Okay. The statement is, there is a statement that reads, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you circled no opinion. Why did you circle no opinion?
Because I just don't know, or what I do know of the media, which is very little, I know the media can exaggerate things or it can downplay things. And so, I don't know.
Okay. There is a statement that reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that.
Somewhat.
Why?
Once again, just what the media portrays. Just for an example, with this resurrection, there were some people that, of course, were arrested. And I think I saw that someone was given permission to go on vacation as opposed to, let them out of jail to go on vacation. And I just kind of wondered, who gets to do that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you talking about kind of what happened at the Capitol
Exactly,
in
right,
Washington?
right, at the Capitol, yes.
Okay.
So.
And someone was released. I haven't heard. I haven't been paying attention to the news of late. Someone was released and allowed to go on vacation.
I believe so.
And I'm presuming that person was white.
I believe so, yes.
And you don't think that other minorities would get that same treatment?
Some may.
Okay. Do you think it's more economic driven versus, or is it more racially driven?
I think it's probably more economic driven.
You were asked, or the statement reads, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that.
Yes.
What about police make you feel unsafe? If you don't strongly agree, you only somewhat agree?
I don't feel like they make me feel unsafe. I do feel like they are there to protect the community, and I appreciate that. So I truly don't feel unsafe. My answer to that, I'm not sure what my thoughts were at that time.
Okay. You were asked a question, because law enforcement officers, I should say, the statement reads that because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make while on duty, and you somewhat disagreed with that. Why? And if you need me to reread that, I can.
Please do.
Certainly. Because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make while on duty.
And I agree with that, you're saying?
You somewhat disagree.
I somewhat disagree. I think officers have to have the power to make the best decision in that moment.
Okay. And that it's possible that there are circumstances where they should be questioned?
Yes.
I mean, I think, would you agree that there are decisions that officers make that are along a spectrum of decisions, right? So an officer is driving, he sees someone, he's observing them, he has time to pull that person over, right? That may be something that's a little bit more subject to question, right? Because he has a conscious, long period of time to make that decision.
Yes.
Or let's make it more nefarious. If an officer is only pulling over African American people in a suburban area, it would be okay to question that officer's decision making. Agreed?
I would agree with that, yes.
Right. Conversely, officers at the other end of the spectrum oftentimes have to make very rapid decisions. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And sometimes they may even get those decisions wrong because they're human. Would you agree with that?
Exactly, right.
Should those decisions be questioned in the same way as the questions about a longer-term conscious decision-making process?
I think they should possibly be questioned. It could help with next times. Could help see it differently.
Okay. And that's fair. I appreciate your comments on that. You were asked a couple of questions in terms of both Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter. And with respect to Black Lives Matter, you had a very favorable response, and you wrote, "I am black and my life matters."
It does.
Absolutely. Are you familiar with like the more organizational or political organization Black Lives Matter?
Not real familiar, no. Just know what I've seen and heard.
Okay. Now, in Blue Lives Matter, you had a more neutral approach or view of them, and you say, everyone is important, and my family member is a police officer.
Correct.
So you'd agree with, I guess, the premise that all lives matter.
Yes.
Fair enough. You have a son-in-law who's a physician.
Yes, I do.
If medical testimony were to become important, would you call your son-in-law and ask him for his opinion?
No, I would not.
Okay. You were asked, I promise you I'm almost done. You were asked a couple of questions about your opinions regarding the justice system, and I have a couple of questions. The question reads, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? And your response was, sometimes. Explain, expand, expound.
Well, I say sometimes because, once again, I don't know the full story. When a story comes out and someone, say, has been arrested or they've been convicted, I'm only seeing what the media is displaying and wants me to read or to know. So I don't really truly know the entire story. So I can only base it on what I hear and what I see.
Sometimes innocent people get convicted, right?
Very true, yes.
You were asked if you want to serve on this juror, and you said yes, and the reason why is because you feel it's your civic duty.
I truly do believe that, yes.
And you believe you can be fair and impartial and judge this case exclusively on the facts as presented in this trial.
Yes, I do.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Cause, Your Honor.
All right, Mr. Slisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. Juror number 91, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How long have you been retired from your current occupation?
About 5 years, I think.
And I noticed that you do some volunteer work without identifying the organization. It appears that it has to do with volunteering with youth. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
Can you please share with us a little bit about why you decided to volunteer in that capacity?
I sometimes enjoy working with children.
Tell me about the times you don't.
Sometimes I don't. Depends on the day. I like teaching children, helping them learn, helping them kind of, find their way.
Can you tell me a little bit about the children that you work with? Volunteer with?
These are, I want to say it, not underserved, probably a little underserved youth that need guidance, that need help with homework, help with, getting up to reading level. They spend a lot of hours away from home because, the parents work. It's usually a single parent home. And so they come to a place where they know they can get help, support, and they'll be safe and play and get the support and homework help that they need.
Now, is this something that you've done since retirement, or have you done this, other times during your adult life?
I've done it other times during my adult life, but since retirement, I just kind of do it intermittently.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because previously you were in a marketing capacity, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
But for a financial institution.
That is correct, yes.
Okay. But your undergraduate degree was in child psychology.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if the volunteering was out of a desire to use those skills, or
I hadn't thought about volunteering to use the skills. I just felt there was a need for strong adult help in that particular place. And I was available to do it, and I was happy to do it.
well, thank you for doing that. You indicated that in terms of your own experience with the criminal justice system, you don't really have any. Is that right?
In terms of being arrested or anything of that nature?
And that was the basis of your saying, in terms of not really being sure if the system is fair or unfair.
Correct. Yes, I don't have any experience there.
Do you have any friends who have shared other experiences with you that maybe felt that they were not treated fairly?
No, I don't.
And you indicated that you once lived in the area where the alleged crime occurred. Is that right?
Close, within about, I'd say 10 blocks, maybe 15 blocks, yes.
But you've since moved away from that neighborhood.
Long ago, yes.
Approximately how long ago?
25, 30 years?
Okay. Do you ever go back to that particular neighborhood to visit?
No, I don't.
Is there any particular reason why you don't return to that neighborhood?
I don't have any friends or family in that neighborhood. I don't do any shopping in that community. I seldom visit the south side of Minneapolis.
Do you, aside from not having any friends there or any particular stores you like to visit, do you specifically avoid going to that area?
Do I avoid?
Do you avoid it?
No, I don't avoid it. I just don't have a need to go. I have a dentist office that's not too far from there, but it doesn't require me to go into that particular community.
All right. One moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions, and we pass for cause.
Thanks. Juror number 91, you are going to be on our jury. And so what we'd like to have you do is come back on March 29th at 9 a.m. That's when we plan on starting the evidence in this case.
Okay.
The deputy will also give you some instructions and maybe take some paperwork from you. But you'll keep the letter that you have because that gets you in here.
Okay. Now that I know how to get in here.
Yeah, that may, you never know, we may, just to mix things up, change that on you. So the jury office will probably be in contact closer to the time just to either remind you, or as you've seen, sometimes we get a little bit of delay here. And so in either case, we'll either remind you that we are starting on that time or have delayed it to a different time, and might give you other facilities and other information.
Okay.
Until then, do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so, sir. Thank
All
you.
right. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
going
you.
through all this process and giving us all your honest answers. So
Thank
you can
you.
go with the deputy. Thank you. All right. We're going to take a 20-minute recess, our afternoon break. Thank you. answer.
Just with respect to the motions that are still pending before the court, I think the court's probably aware I did file change of venue and memorandum today. Motion regarding the continuance as well as the change of venue. I would also note that the city of Minneapolis has conducted yet another press conference regarding the settlement today, with the Minneapolis city attorney and the mayor disagreeing on some points as to the impact of the settlement on the juror and the intention behind that. I would note that the city of Minneapolis has indicated that the timing was of the essence, yet the agreement is not yet final, has not been finalized, and will not be finalized for approximately another month based upon the process in the federal lawsuit with the federal court. So it raises the question of whether the announcement was necessary regardless of the timing. So I just want to make the court aware of it, that this is an ongoing public discussion that the mayor and now city attorney are engaging in.
Noted. Let's bring our next juror. Juror number 92. Come on up, have a seat. Well, good afternoon. You are juror number 92, correct? Mm-hmm. All right. Well, first of all, a couple matters before I turn over the attorneys for questioning. First thing is I'm going to swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. Thank you. First of all, you have plexiglass in front of you and between us. The attorneys also have a plexiglass shield in front of them, and they're quite a bit away from you. The point being, we have enough precautions that if you feel more comfortable taking your mask off, okay, feel free to do so.
Okay.
And if you feel like you want to put it back on, also feel free to do
Okay.
whatever is appropriate.
Okay.
Now, you filled out a questionnaire, and we appreciate you doing that. It gives us a lot of good information to start with. Was everything true on the questionnaire?
Yes.
All right. Any changes or additions to the questionnaire?
I don't think so.
Okay, and asking that question cold kind of doesn't really usually yield a response.
Oh. Yeah.
But when the attorneys go through the questionnaire and they ask you specific questions and answers, it might invoke a memory that you go, oh, I should have included this or that, or that's not accurate, or that opinion has evolved. My point being that no matter what the question is, you should feel comfortable and free to give an answer that is different from what's in your questionnaire. We're just looking for where you're at right now and what's the most honest and accurate answer you can give. And when the lawyers are asking the questions, it's very likely, because it's been several months, that they will read the question and your answer. They're not trying to be confrontational. It's just to refresh your memory of what you said. But right now you don't know of anything, but later on, feel free to comment.
Say something. Okay.
Now, one of the things you were not supposed to do, or the questionnaire told you, was not to follow any media since you are a potential juror. We understand, however, that it's been a couple months since you filled out the questionnaire. And given the amount of coverage this case is getting, you might have been exposed inadvertently to information about this case or related cases, things like, pretrial matters, lawyers, anything like that. Is there anything of substance that you've heard about in the intervening time between the questionnaire and today?
The settlement.
Okay, and what do you remember about hearing about the settlement specifically?
The amount that was given to the family.
Okay, do you remember the amount?
$27 million.
Okay. What effect do you think that's going to have on your ability to serve as a juror in this case?
None at all.
Okay. Have you thought through that process?
Serving?
Serving, knowing this settlement.
Oh, it doesn't make any difference in my decision making.
Okay. I think you indicated on your questionnaire that you could be fair and impartial in this case. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's like question 10 answer in part 1. So you came in after the questionnaire, fair and impartial. Has that knowledge of that settlement moved you off that position one way or the other?
No.
Okay. You recognize that case, it's a separate case, it's a civil case, different parties, different legal issues, different law. It has no bearing on this case. Do you accept that?
I do.
Okay. And as far as you know, it's not going to affect it, and if it's not in evidence, which it won't be, you won't consider it as part of this case?
I will not.
Okay, excellent. And that brings up the general point, which is everybody's heard something about this case. There's certain facts that people have learned from the media or maybe through conversations. Some of it may be accurate, some of it may not be. And you may have even formed certain opinions based on what you know about the case. Do you think you can put aside all the things you've heard and any opinions you might have formed and just decide this case just on the evidence of the law that you hear in the courtroom?
I do.
Okay. The law that comes from me. Even if you think should be different, you'll accept what I tell you. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Did you recognize any of the witnesses who were on the witness list?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Do you want me to tell you the name?
Well, let me tell. Were there a few?
There was one name I recognized, but it was
Okay.
It was from, like, it could have been a same name from somebody I knew when I was like 11 years old, and
Okay.
then another one that I don't know what I'm supposed to say.
Yeah. No, that's wise. You're being very cautious. Because we don't want you saying things that might allow people out there to identify who you are. We're doing what we can to protect your anonymity as a juror and respect your privacy. What we'll probably do is since you have a couple of people to talk about, we'll probably go off the audio so that the only people who can hear about it are the people in the courtroom. And the press is not reporting any substance of things we say when we go off audio. Okay?
Okay.
And do you think that would make more sense so we can get some more details?
Yes.
All right. Any objection to that? All right. What we're going to do now is we are going to go off audio at this point. Broadcast. All right, we are back on audio. Well, thank you for that information. And the length of the trial we anticipate to be about 4 weeks, starting March 29th. Can you make that work for you?
I can.
Okay. Any personal, professional problems, hardships that we should know about if you were to be here?
No.
All right. Great. Thank you very much. Then I'm going to turn over to Mr. Nelson as to juror number 92. Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience. I'm going to ask you a series of kind of just general questions, get to know you a little bit better,
Okay.
and then follow up with some of your responses on the questionnaire, if that would be all right.
Okay.
I'm not going to try to trick you. I'll actually read you what you wrote. Did you keep a copy of this?
I did not. No.
So I'll read you what you wrote, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So if you and I were to meet under different circumstances at a social event, a party, work gathering, whatever, we have our first conversation. What are a couple of things I'm going to learn about you during that conversation?
What would that you would learn about me? Very family oriented, friends, very important to me. Love my work.
Okay. And you're kind of in the insurance business generally.
Yes.
Personal benefits or homeowner type stuff?
Commercial.
Commercial? Okay. All right. And you've been in that business a while?
Yeah, I've been the same company maybe, I don't know, is that like 15 years?
Okay. And you had obviously heard about this matter prior to filling out this packet, right?
I did.
And when you received the jury summons and the notice that you were a prospective juror in this case, specifically, what was your reaction?
Very shocked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't expect to be a part of something of this magnitude. It just didn't cross my mind.
Sure, it's not like a shoplifting case or something
Right,
like that,
yes,
right?
it's not what you really hear of when you...
Okay.
I'm going to ask you to do one thing.
Yeah.
Court partner has a hard time if we talk over each other.
Okay.
So, and we're the worst offenders, so. But if you could try to kind of keep a space between the question and answer, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, and I will try as well, Your Honor.
Me too.
Thanks. Did you have concerns about your personal safety, COVID, family safety, any of that type of concern?
The only personal safety matter would be if the only thing that came to mind would be what would happen to me if I was a juror after. Like, if somebody found out, or that
Okay.
was my main concern.
Okay. Well, let's kind of work up to that, if you don't mind. What did you think about the government center when you got down here today? When you saw the military and the fencing and all of that stuff, what was your reaction?
Quite honestly, it made me feel pretty protected.
All right. So while you're here, at least you feel safe, you feel protected, right? Were you shocked at the scale of it? Like how many people and how much fencing there was?
How many people I saw, or that would lead me to each particular point along the way to get here.
It was a little, it was a lot, right?
Yes.
Okay. How about when you came into the courtroom and you were told that your photos aren't going to be taken, your pictures not being televised, stuff like that? Did that make you feel better, worse, indifferent?
Indifferent. I knew it wouldn't be.
Okay. So you knew that kind of coming in, that you were not going to be televised?
Correct.
All right. And were you instructed that like by the court, or did someone tell you that they're watching, or how did you learn that?
I honestly don't know. I think I just knew that you don't show the faces.
Okay. All right, fair enough. And then you understand that we're doing everything we can to protect your anonymity, but at some point your name may be released, and that would be when the court deems it safe to do so. We have no idea what that means or how long it will take, but at some point your name would be publicly released. How does that make you feel?
I'm pretty confident it'll be okay.
Okay, fair enough. So, can you think of a situation in your personal or professional life where you have been called upon to resolve conflict?
Only maybe in my personal life with family members.
Okay.
That's probably about it.
Well, you understand that your role here as a juror is essentially to dive right into some conflict, right?
Right.
There's obviously a pretty big conflict between the state of Minnesota and Derek Chauvin. That's the global conflict, so to speak. But then if you're a juror in the jury deliberation room, there may be conflict between you and other jurors or just between other jurors. And what I mean by that is not that I think people are going to start fighting physically, but that there will be people who disagree with you or disagree with others within the group. So that's what I mean by conflict. How do you approach the resolution of conflict, first, when it involves two people and not yourself, and second, when it involves you?
Well, if it's two people, I generally get both sides and try to come to some sort of an agreement.
Okay. So it's kind of talk it through, listen to both sides, try to reach an agreement.
Yes.
How about when it involves you?
You mean as far as like if I'm in a conflict with somebody?
Right.
I do the same thing.
Okay.
Take what the person is saying, make my own decisions on how I'm going to move forward.
Okay. Do you think it's more difficult if you are personally involved to resolve conflict?
Yes.
Okay. And why?
I just think you have more emotion when it's you personally, when instead of looking at two people outside of yourself.
Right. So think about it in this context. Is during the course of this trial, there will be evidence that comes into the courtroom, and you will be in the jury room, and you and your jurors, or the fellow jurors, are talking about various pieces of evidence that were admitted during the trial. And one group of jurors thinks that some group or particular piece of evidence is really important, and others don't. Now, you're kind of in the middle. You don't know. How do you approach that type of a situation?
If I'm in the middle and I don't know?
Mm-hmm. But there's a conflict, right, between the interpretation of this evidence.
I'd probably do the same thing, just listen to both sides and make the best decision upon what they're saying.
Okay. Now, ultimately, you understand that a jury decision has to be unanimous, meaning all 12 of you would have to agree. But you have this division, right? How do you work towards resolution of that conflict?
I don't know other than just stating what my feelings are.
Okay. I mean, one piece of evidence may tie to another piece of evidence, and someone may recall something differently than you. So is it just sort of talking it through, looking at all the evidence, and trying to reach a decision?
Yeah.
Are you the type of person that will just agree with someone simply to get this process over with, or make a decision?
No, I'm not, but I probably wouldn't be the first one to make a statement or...
You probably would not be?
No.
Okay. Why do you say that?
I'm more of an observer.
Okay. Will you speak your opinion if you think it's important?
I will.
But are you kind of sit back, get everyone's perspectives, and then pout, so to speak?
Yes.
Is that an accurate kind of description?
Did you say pout or pounce?
Pounce.
Oh, pounce, yes. Yes.
Not pout.
Or pout.
Or pout, maybe, I don't know. But you're not going to just agree with people for the sake of agreeing with people.
Not in this situation, no.
Okay. I mean, I guess it's different than what restaurant we go to, right? Mm-hmm. Have you ever been confronted with or tasked with trying to decide if someone is telling you the truth about a certain situation?
In life, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
How do you kind of make that analysis?
Just the same way. I listen to what someone's telling me and then make a decision on what I've heard.
Okay. Do you think that two people can observe the same event and have completely different interpretations of what happened?
I do.
And they may be seeing the same thing, and they ascribe certain meaning to something. Mm-hmm. Why do you think that happens?
Some of it is just personality. I mean.
Okay. What about personal experiences? Do you think our personal experiences formulate how we look at or observe events?
I do. Yeah. Things that have happened in your past or people that you're around, I think that forms a lot of who you are and what you think. And
okay. What about your training, a person's training or education? Do you think that that may affect how they perceive an event?
Yeah, I do.
Okay. Can you think of a circumstance where that may come up?
Training or education. I mean, if you're given tools or I guess I'm not really going to have a good answer for that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me give you an example. A wall falls down, right? And there's an architect and a builder and a truck driver, right? And we got to figure out how to put this wall back up. Do you think that their training and experience may come into play?
Yes.
Okay. And some people may have, you can maybe easily take their opinion off the table, and others are, you're going to listen to a little bit more carefully?
Yes, yeah.
Now, let me, in that same situation, would you simply believe someone based upon their training and education over someone else who's observing it? That same situation? Just by virtue of their training and education?
No, I guess it depends on the situation, but
Right.
no, I wouldn't just go based on what someone's trained or educated. I'd have my own thoughts on.
Like, what if you were to learn that that truck driver has built 10,000 walls in his life? And even though he's a truck driver, he's got a lot of experience.
Sure, it'd give them credibility.
Right. And what if you learn that that architect, he only has just graduated from college and he's never designed anything? Do you think that that could make a difference?
Yeah, I do.
Ultimately your job here is, as a juror, is to listen to the evidence as it's presented in court, to analyze it, and to apply the law as the judge gives it to you. At the end of the case, the judge is going to tell you what the law is that you need to decide. And sometimes, occasionally, jurors will read the law and they'll say, that can't be right. There's no way that that's right. Or this should be changed, right? If that were to happen, if you were to read the law and say, I think the law should be different, can you follow the law as the judge gives it to you, regardless of whether you think it's wrong or it should be changed?
Yes, yeah.
All right. Thank you for those answers. I'm going to ask you some questions, some follow-up questions on your questionnaire.
Okay.
Again, the questionnaire kind of makes reference to, and I think some of your answers make reference to a video, and I want to make sure we're talking about the same video. There was a bystander video that was uploaded to Facebook. It went viral, became international news. Is that the video, as you understand, that you've seen?
I've not seen the full video.
Okay, but when we talk generally about the video, that's the video?
It is, yeah.
Have you seen, there were other videos that were released, like body cameras, there were some surveillance videos from local businesses. Have you seen any of those videos?
No. Mm-mm.
Okay. And the video, you said you've not seen it in its entirety. Is that right?
Correct.
The bystander video? Have you just seen it like on the news, or have you seen it like...
Yeah, just like a clip of it.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So at no point did you go on Facebook or social media and try to find the original video?
No.
Okay. And you estimated that you'd seen that video 4 to 5 times?
Mm-hmm.
And you had obviously read some news stories and had conversations with friends, right, about this case?
Yeah.
And so you were able to kind of write down a paragraph or so about what you remembered hearing prior when you filled this out?
Right.
Okay. Would you agree that some of what you heard or recalled may just be wrong?
Yes.
Okay. And you can look at the evidence as it's presented in court, and even if there's something that you kind of remember hearing from before, can you set that aside and focus only on the evidence as it's presented in court?
Yeah.
All right. And there may be information whether it's true or not, that is not admitted in this trial. Can you set those other pieces of information about Mr. Chauvin or Mr. Floyd that you may have heard? Again, only focus on what you hear here.
Yes.
All right. You were asked about your impression, your general impression of both Mr. Chauvin and Mr. Floyd. And for both, you had a somewhat negative, you checked the box somewhat negative, right? I mean,
I did.
that's fair enough. All right. And what you wrote about Mr. Chauvin is you wrote, the media paints Derek Chauvin as an aggressive cop with tax problems. All right?
Just what I heard.
Understood. And again, you're entitled to form your own opinion. You're entitled to form, you were exposed to information. Nobody's questioning that, all right? But you understand that whether there's a companion case or something else going on in a different county, it has nothing to do with this particular case?
Yes.
All right. And you may have that. So I guess the question is if you're in the jury room, right, and you never hear anything about a tax case, in this case, are you going to go, I think we should not believe him because of that tax situation?
No, that's not going to, no, that wouldn't sway my decision.
Okay. Well, and likewise, too, with respect to Mr. Floyd, you heard that what you wrote is you heard George Floyd's record wasn't clean and he abused drugs at some point, right? Mm-hmm. That's what you had heard about him? Mm-hmm. Now, again, whether or not any of that information comes in to trial here, can you likewise set that information aside, what you may have heard, and again, focus only on the evidence that's presented in this trial?
Yeah, I mean, I understand what I'm hearing is just coming from certain parties, and it's not necessarily
True.
or yeah, I mean.
Okay. You were asked about your conversations with friends and family members or potentially posting any information on social media about the case. Did you ever post anything on social media about this case?
No, I don't post on social media.
Okay. But you did have conversations with friends and family then, and when you were asked what opinions have you expressed, you wrote, I don't believe he deserved to die and that the cops used excessive force, but I don't believe he is completely innocent. So I'm going to assume the he in this situation is Mr. Floyd?
Correct.
All right. But you formed the opinion that the police used excessive force?
From what I heard, I did.
Okay. You're not a police officer, I presume?
I am not.
You've not had police training?
No.
And are you able to articulate the legal definition of what constitutes excessive force?
No, I am not.
All right. So I guess my question is again, it's perfectly fine that you have formed an opinion. I'm not questioning that. Mm-hmm. And that your opinion was that excessive force that was used. Can you set that aside, kind of like become a blank slate and move forward?
Yes.
And listen only to the evidence in the case?
Right. Mm-hmm.
You were asked a question of whether you believe your community has been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests that have taken place in the Twin Cities area. And without identifying your city, you wrote, not my close community.
No.
So I'm going to assume that what you mean by that is there was no rioting that occurred in your
correct.
city,
No.
right?
Correct.
Is kind of something that's emerged as we've talked to jurors over the last couple of weeks is the difference between protests and riots. Do you think there's a difference?
Yes.
Okay. How would you define the difference between a protest and a riot?
I would say riot generally involves violence. A protest is standing up for what you believe or, gathering and with like-minded people. Okay.
And neither protests nor riots occurred in your city?
No.
Okay. Now, but generally speaking, do you think that I'm going to differentiate between protesting and rioting in the Minneapolis area, generally speaking, right, the Twin Cities area? Do you think that's positive or negative?
That there's a difference?
Well, just, do you think that there was a positive or negative impact as a result of protesting in this city?
I personally think actually both. I think some things led to the rioting, and I think that some people brought awareness through their protesting.
Okay. You had your purse stolen at one point?
I did.
All right. And you checked that you were very unsatisfied with how the police handled that situation.
I did?
You did.
Oh. Okay, maybe I misspoke. I honestly, I don't remember much about calling the police on it. It was a long time ago.
Sure.
Oh, I can't believe I wrote that.
Okay. I just was, I didn't know if there was anything. So let's ask you, do you remember calling the police when your purse was stolen?
I honestly don't remember a lot about it. I just remember that they had retrieved my purse after.
Okay. Is there anything about that situation that would bias you against police officers in
No.
general? Okay.
No. Oh, I can't believe I did that.
Well, now you know what we need when we say things. You think about it,
I
things
don't know if maybe I was just, yeah.
There are a series of kind of broad blanket statements in the questionnaire, and you were asked to kind of rank your opinion from somewhat agree, strongly disagree. Do you remember that generally?
Yeah.
And I want to ask you just about a couple of them. The statement is made, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be, and you somewhat disagree with that statement. So media, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be. So you disagree with that. Why?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
It is it's a double negative.
Okay.
So, discrimination is not as bad as the media makes it out to be.
And I said I somewhat disagree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it depends on what station you listen to, but I don't think we see all of what goes on. I think we just see a highlight of, things that get escalated to a unfortunate point.
Okay. The kind of a corollary statement reads, blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you somewhat agreed with that.
I do.
So I think in both situations you acknowledge that discrimination exists, right?
I do.
But it may not be every single incident. Is that
Correct.
fair to say?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. You were asked about police in my community make me feel safe, and you strongly agreed with that statement?
Yeah, I've just had a few instances I've called where either, something minor happened at my place and they arrived in a quick manner and...
Professional and
Yeah.
made you feel safe.
Correct.
And you strongly disagreed with the notion of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department.
Correct.
Okay. I guess the question being is, it seems that you have a healthy respect for police officers.
I do.
A very strong respect is another way of saying that.
I do.
Okay. Now, you have a police officer on trial here, and you have police officers who will be testifying. Will you take the word of a police officer simply by virtue of the fact that he's a police officer to be more credible than the testimony of other people?
No.
Can you assess the testimony of all people equally, all witnesses?
Right, I can.
You were asked a couple of questions about the Black Lives and Blue Lives Matter. With respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote that you had a somewhat favorable opinion and you believe people of other races are treated unfairly, but I don't get involved to support the cause. I mean, so You're not out protesting yourself, in other words, or participating in that organization or movement. Is that
No, I am not.
But you have a favorable view of them.
Yeah. I believe they have the right to do it.
Okay, and you have a very favorable opinion of Blue Lives Matter, and you wrote, "I would be terrified if our police departments were dismantled. However, it is obvious that change needs to happen."
Yes.
Your mother was a nurse.
She was.
She retired or passed on?
She's passed away.
I'm sorry for that.
Thank you.
You were asked a series of questions about some principles of law, and you were asked, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? And you wrote, yes, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. So, again, will you apply the presumption of innocence in this particular case?
Yes.
The last question you were asked is whether you want to serve as a juror on this case, and you wrote not sure, and you explained that I would be fearful of any backlash for my choice of a verdict. So I guess my question is, you understand there are two possible outcomes at the end of this case, right?
I do.
Guilty or not guilty. Would your fearfulness of whatever the backlash may be cause you to render a verdict that you thought was wrong, but simply to avoid any potential backlash?
No.
Okay. You feel you could be a fair and impartial juror in this case?
I do.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, juror number 92.
Hello.
Just to follow up on a couple of things, I see that you have a bachelor's degree.
I do.
What is it in?
Communication.
Communication. It also indicates on your survey that you left our state for a brief period of time, 4 years. Was it to attend college?
It was.
Okay. And then you came back. You just couldn't stay away.
Yep. Family's too important.
All right.
And I love the state.
You made a couple of comments, and just following up on some questions that counsel raised regarding your belief that you somewhat agree that blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites. You disagreed with the proposition that police in the country treat whites and blacks equally. And I'm just wondering if you've had conversations with close friends, work associates, in which those opinions have been shared with you by people who've actually experienced some sort of mistreatment.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some friends that have been treated differently because of their race. That's pretty much.
And without revealing who those friends are, can you share with us a little bit about how they were treated differently? What happened to them?
Just names were called. That's basically what happened to them.
Like racial slurs?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about in terms of just treatment from somebody who wouldn't be that overtly mean to someone, but just in terms of their being treated by folks, say walking into a store or some other social situation? Have they ever expressed any sort of discrimination that they've faced in those situations?
No, it was mainly just through school.
Ah, okay. You say that you strongly disagree with the proposition of defunding the Minneapolis Police Department. Can you tell us a little bit why that's something that would bother you? Because I think you also indicated something about being frightened if something like that were to happen.
I guess maybe what I was going by was a blurb that they had on the news where people were saying that they wanted to do like a community outreach instead of have law enforcement present, and that I guess would terrify me.
How do you think that would work out?
I don't think it would work out very well.
Okay.
No.
Why is that?
I mean, just look at riots. I don't think that it doesn't seem to quite solve the problems.
Okay. Back to some of the questions that you heard about some of the people who were involved here. You indicated that you heard that perhaps the defendant's spouse had filed for divorce. I'm wondering what, if any, effect that might have.
It doesn't have any effect.
Okay.
I was just trying to say anything I knew or had heard.
Okay. You also indicated that you heard that George Floyd's record wasn't clean, and I'm wondering if you can recall, specifically anything that you heard about George Floyd's record, what he may have done prior to the incident.
If I recall correctly, I had heard information about drug charges or being involved with drugs.
Anything else? Any other acts aside from use of drugs or drug charges?
No.
Have you ever had a close friend or a family member struggle with addiction to illegal drugs or alcohol?
Alcohol.
Alcohol?
I have. Mm-hmm.
If you were to hear that George Floyd struggled with illegal drugs, for example, do you think that might make you feel more favorably or less favorably toward him?
In this particular instance, or just about him in
neither?
general?
Yeah. First in general, and then maybe for this specific incident. And I should always give you the choice of no opinion, right? So do you think that would have any effect on your opinion of him generally?
Quite honestly, maybe. If it was somebody I was going to trust, if in that kind of instance, it might give me pause. But I do understand that people, there's reasons that they struggle with addiction.
So
it doesn't make them a bad person, I guess I should say. It would
Okay.
just make me cautious.
And why is that? Why would you want to be more cautious around a person who's struggling with drugs?
Mental state might not be the best, depending on why, they've reached that point. Maybe fear of how people act when they're intoxicated.
Tell me a little bit about that. What has been your own observation of how people might act when they're intoxicated, either on alcohol or drugs?
Just the level of anger people can get to under intoxication.
Do you believe that people who are intoxicated may tend to act more violently or aggressively when they're under the influence?
Yes, they can.
And when we say intoxication, oftentimes we're referring to alcohol, but I'm including drug intoxication as well. Do you think that someone who's taken drugs, illegal drugs, may act more violently or aggressively than someone else who has not?
I do.
Do you believe that's always the case, or that perhaps
No.
it depends on the drug or it depends on the person?
I think it depends on the drug, the person, what situation they're in.
Someone may hold the opinion that if a person is harmed and they've been using illegal drugs, then they kind of get what's coming to them. And I'm wondering what you think about that statement or what your views are on that.
I don't think that's true.
And why is that?
I don't. If someone uses drugs, I don't think that they should there should be ramifications of violence for that.
Okay. You indicated that you have a respect for law enforcement. I'm assuming that you also would agree that it's important to cooperate with law enforcement if they approach you.
Correct.
Is that something you would do, I'm assuming?
Would do and have.
Okay. Tell me about that. You say you have.
Oh, just getting pulled over and just making the proper steps, getting your license and insurance out and cooperating with the police.
And this has happened to you, and you did that. You cooperated.
Correct.
People may hold the opinion that if one does not immediately cooperate with the police, does not comply with their requests or their orders, and they're subsequently harmed, they might get what's coming to them as well. What do you think of that?
I don't believe that.
Why is that?
I don't think that. I don't think someone has something coming to them. I mean, there's obviously rules and regulations for, acting outside of the law. And there's also rules and regulations for how you treat those people.
How you, as in how law enforcement treats those people?
Correct.
Okay. Well, you recognize then that some people may not immediately comply with law enforcement, and that would not be an excuse for law enforcement to use excessive force?
I do. I believe that.
Without identifying your employer or providing any identifying information, I'm just interested in hearing about what you specifically do in your job. What does it mean to be a client advocate?
I work on accounts of our insureds, so I'm kind of the day-to-day go-between.
And
I guess.
So you communicate client concerns to your
Correct.
company? Okay. Have you been working at the office since the pandemic, or from home?
Strictly at home.
Strictly at home. How's that been working out?
I love it.
Okay. Maybe you're not going to go back?
We have to go back. We have to have an office presence.
Okay. Do you have any concerns coming here? If you were called as a juror, if you're seated as a juror, you have to come downtown, be around some people in relatively close contact, although we're distancing here. Does that raise any concerns for you?
No.
You think maybe we're taking too many precautions and this is a little overblown? Or?
No, I don't. The main person I was keeping safe has been vaccinated, so I'm a little less freaked out about it, I guess I would say.
Okay, fair enough. One moment, Your Honor. Just to follow up, you indicated on the survey regarding your opinion of Blue Lives Matter, and this is where you said you'd be terrified if police departments were dismantled. But you went on to say that however, there is obvious change that needs to happen. Can you share with us what is the obvious change that you believe needs to happen?
I guess I would say it does look like, for I guess what's portrayed on the media is other races aren't necessarily treated fairly.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your answers today. And, Your Honor, the state passes for cause.
Right. Juror 92, you will serve on our jury. And so we're going to have you come back on March 29th at 9 a.m. The jury office will be in contact with you if there's any change, but they'll probably be in contact just to remind you, maybe give you other facilities or other logistics information. But for now, you can go with the deputy. They'll take some paperwork from you. You have the letter that got you in here. Make sure you keep that safe and
Okay.
Bring it back next time. So
Okay.
we'll see you on March 29th.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Juror number 95. I think you can let number 96 go. Counsel, we already did let 96 go, is that right? Okay, so this is the last one we have available. All right, come on up, sir. You have a seat right there. And you are juror number 95, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. Couple things before I turn you over to the lawyers for questioning. First thing is I'm going to swear you in because all of your answers have to be under oath. So raise your right hand, please. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right, thank you. We have plexiglass in front of you, between us. The lawyers are quite a distance away, and they have plexiglass as well. My point being, if you would like, you can remove your mask for this, or you can keep it on. It's totally your choice.
Thank you.
Whatever makes you comfortable, you do that.
Thank you.
And whether you mask on or off, if you could pull just a little closer to the microphone, we've got to make sure that we can hear you nice and loud.
Yeah, is this good?
Perfect.
All right, thank you.
You filled out a questionnaire, and thank you for doing that. It gave us a lot of good information to start with. So, is there anything about that questionnaire that you need to change or add to?
No.
Okay, and everything was true on the questionnaire?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, sometimes during the questioning, since it was several months ago, people realize that there's some stuff missing or stuff that was inaccurate and you need to amend. Or maybe there's an opinion you expressed that has evolved and it's different now. In all those cases, feel free. I want you to feel comfortable saying something in court here that is different from your questionnaire. Okay?
Sure.
Any problem doing that?
No.
Okay. The questionnaire also advised you not to read any articles, watch any media about this case. But between when you filled out the questionnaire and today, is there anything you've heard or been exposed to about this case, related cases, pretrial matters, just about anything that might be important for us to know? And we know it's all inadvertent because you can't escape a headline sometimes.
Well, that's right. So I do listen to radio in my car, the NPR. And, well, my household watches news all the time, so that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what did you hear new information about this case or related cases?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you recall hearing? And again, we know this is inadvertent, that you can't escape it sometimes.
Right. So just about the settlement.
Okay. What do you recall about the settlement?
Just that it was settlement amount was around the $27 million.
Okay.
Which was, and that's about it.
And what was your reaction to that?
Well, to be honest, it was like when I heard, I was shocked,
Okay.
and I didn't expect the settlement to come sooner than the case. So,
Then the criminal case.
right.
Okay. You recognize that civil case involves different parties, different issues, different laws.
Yes.
It's not a part of this case. You recognize that.
Yes.
So did it affect you in any way as far as being a juror on this case, or would it affect you in any way?
Well, certainly I looked at it differently before the settlement, and for sure right now I look at it a little bit differently.
Okay. For example, in question 10, which basically asks, no matter what you've heard, could you be fair and impartial? And you answered yes. Do you think the needle's moved on that a little bit, and that maybe you can't be as impartial as before when you heard about the settlement?
Not really.
Okay, tell me about that. Your thought process on that.
So, of course, when anything is settled, then you look at that maybe the person was guilty, or, and your thought process runs differently than before the trial. Most of the cases I have heard in the past is the settlement comes after the fact,
Okay.
and that's fair enough. Like, maybe it was damage or loss of something, and you settle in some way or another. But whenever there's a case, especially, if it's a criminal case and it is settled, or settlement comes way before the case, then you might think that, well, did it get settled because of, the person is guilty. Okay. So that's about it.
Okay, and do you think that thought might linger in your mind so that it'd be hard to get back to impartial? Even if you were to try your hardest, it's obviously not a intelligence or personality issue. It's just some people, when they hear certain things, it's like, I can't get that out of my mind. Some can say, nope, I can put it aside. But some people say I can't, and it's kind of moved me off of the impartial dime, so to speak.
Yes, I mean, it is hard to get out of the mind, but once you hear more, and you find that you can change your opinion, stuff. So.
Okay. Let me see if I can understand what you just said. Do you think that you're impartial? This may have moved you one way, but that what you hear in court might move you again? Or
Yes.
Is that accurate, what you're saying?
Right.
Okay. Do you think that when you filled out the questionnaire, I think you said you could presume the defendant innocent.
Can you come up with that?
And let me see if I can go right to the answer. You'd think I would know this questionnaire by now. Basically talks about the presumption of innocence, and asks if you can presume the defendant innocent. In fact, it says, under our system of justice, defendants are presumed innocent of the criminal charge against them. Would you have any difficulty following the principle of law? And you said no, if correct justice, law, and principles were followed.
Correct.
Can you explain a little bit more on that?
So I still believe, that, I believe in the justice system and the law, and just like, for example, in the example of the settlement, right? That is not my last decision, or like what's last in my mind. of course, whenever I hear the
Did you
whole
know you can
thing
go to
and
libertymutual.com to customize your
the
car
law
insurance so
and
you only pay?
the legal system, I would vote differently.
Okay.
So I would definitely hear what the law has to say, hear both sides, and then make up my mind.
Based on just what you've heard and know so far, where are you sitting? Can you say, yep, I can presume him innocent, or, I don't know, that settlement talk made it harder to do that?
I would say right in the middle.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about that. When you say right about in the middle, kind of.
So, yeah, the settlement, it's like it presumes that, yeah, the person might be guilty, and because it's settled. But again, if you hear in the court stuff, witnesses and other, testimonies, then you will consider it and say, okay, maybe it's not guilty, or so. That's why I say I'm in the middle.
Sure. Let me ask you this question. You filled out the questionnaire, you mailed it in. You may have had some opinions about the case, which you have to put aside. But you said you have no problem with the presumption of innocence if court justice law and principles are followed. So, are you in that same frame of mind today after hearing about that settlement? And I'm not going to make you quantify
Yes.
one way or the other. Okay.
Yes.
Do you think that would affect kind of that where there's smoke, there's fire? You've heard that. Do you think that's applicable here? Do you think that might be a situation?
Not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to turn over to Mr. Nelson to inquire. There might be some other questions he has about this. I'm probably not being very articulate about this. So,
Yeah.
Mr. Nelson, you may inquire.
May just be a long day, right?
It's,
So, sir, good afternoon. Thank you for your patience today. I'm going to just kind of start where the judge left off a little bit,
Sure.
if you don't mind. Under our system of law, Mr. Chauvin right now is presumed innocent. That means the starting point is he's presumed innocent. What I hear you saying is that settlement, right, has put you in a frame of mind that leads you to believe that maybe if the city of Minneapolis, for example, believes something was wrong, that there's something to that. Is that a
Yes.
fair statement?
Yes.
Okay. But you understand here in the criminal case, we should not have to get over that burden. We shouldn't have to disprove anything. And you need to start from zero. Can you start from zero?
Yes.
Okay. So you can put that settlement out of your mind, just move it completely out of your mind and start at square one or zero and presume Mr. Chauvin innocent.
Yes.
Okay. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
And you understand that what the city of Minneapolis may or may not do in terms of a civil settlement has no bearing on this case.
Yes.
We don't even know if the politicians have seen any of the evidence in this case, right? They made a decision for other reasons. Can you accept that?
Yeah.
Okay. So I am going to just ask you some pretty general questions first and foremost, and then I'm going to ask you about some of your responses to the questionnaire.
Yes.
Would that be all right with you?
Sure.
Okay. And I'll try to make this as quick as I can here. All right. If you and I were to meet under certain different circumstances at a party, what are a couple things I would learn about you?
I'm a people's person, so and I really don't like to judge anybody, and I'm really a person of I got to know you first before I can make any assumptions about you. So that's the kind of person I am. I usually get along with everyone and just be. I'm a pretty socialized person, I would say. So yeah.
Okay. Let me ask you a question, because you indicated that you like to watch cricket.
Yes.
Could you explain to me the rules of cricket?
No.
I'm sorry.
That would take a long time.
Yeah. But generally, that's what you like. You enjoy to watching cricket.
Yes, it's pretty close to baseball.
Okay.
So.
And I get that. I was kind of more making a joke because I don't really know. So, when you learned, you knew something about this case, right? Before you learned you were a potential juror in this case?
Yes.
Right? When you learned that you were a potential juror in this case, how did you react to that?
Pretty neutral. I was like, I've never been through a jury duty, so whether it would be this case or any other, I was just surprised. Like, it's an opportunity for me to do something for the country. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Were you concerned about your personal or physical safety?
Not really, if it's very confidential, and the only people who knows about it is my immediate family. So,
Okay. At some point, when the judge determines it to be safe, your identity may be revealed to the public. Are you okay with that?
when you say that, tell me more of that.
Well, we don't know when
Okay.
that will happen. We're doing everything we can to maintain your anonymity during trial. And at some point, though, in the future, we have no idea when, but when the judge determines it to be safe, your name will be released publicly.
Okay.
Does that concern you?
Yes.
Okay. Why?
For the safety of myself and my family.
All right. Would you be concerned that one particular verdict or another may bring you more harm?
No.
Okay. So you would think that any verdict could potentially bring you or your family harm?
Yes.
Would that concern, would it be so pervasive and so just kind of ongoing if you were a juror on this case that it would prevent you from focusing on the evidence in this case?
Knowing the being public of myself later, yes.
Okay. So you would be not able to focus on the evidence in this case, because of your concerns for your safety.
Correct.
Any further questions?
No. All right, sir, I think given your exposure to the settlement, which might have some impact on you, I think you would try your best not to have it. But I still think that it might weigh on your mind, but more importantly, the safety of your family. If it weighs on your mind to the point where you can't really focus on the evidence, and that's perfectly fine. I'm glad you were honest about that. And so I'm going to excuse you from this jury. And in fact, you're excused from jury service, so we won't need to call you up on another case. Unless, of course, you get a summons a few years from now.
Sure.
All right? You can go with the deputy. They'll collect some paperwork from you, and then have a good day.
Sure, thank you.
You bet.
Do I leave this with...
You can actually give that to the deputy, and we'll dispose of that. Thank you. Say that was an excusal for cause on, I assume, a defense motion. Am I correct on that defense motion? That's kind of the way we have been operating as a code, so that we aren't openly challenging the juror in front of them. That concludes the number of jurors we have today. 8:15 tomorrow for decisions on the motions. We'll start with jurors at 9. I'm not sure, have the parties filed their briefs? Because it was closed business today that I expected any briefs, so that I have something to read tonight.
I think they're all filed at this point, Your Honor.
Okay. As long as they're filed, I can find them.
Not sure about the status of ours, but.
Okay.
And I would like to make a record to address a point that was raised by defense counsel earlier.
Sure. You may.
And it's a record, and it's really a request, and that is that we proceed just kind of collectively with some caution before making assertions regarding things that are happening outside of the courtroom. I think that sometimes we're very quick to react to information that may or may not be accurate. And I think, Your Honor, that is something that happened today. I did request just a little bit further information regarding what counsel indicated was a press conference held by the city of Minneapolis in which they discussed the settlement. And I don't believe that as portrayed that was accurate. And what I have, and if the court's permission, I could provide to the court as a court exhibit a transcript from the Minneapolis mayor's weekly press briefing that I believe counsel was referencing. And I think that it will put into exact context what was said. First of all, this was not a press release or a press briefing that was called to discuss the George Floyd case, or a briefing about, or a press conference about the settlement. It was the weekly press briefing that the city of Minneapolis always has. And there were, in response to some questions by reporters, references made to the settlement, and specifically in which the mayor basically says we're not going to be discussing anything about the ongoing criminal proceedings. And so
that wasn't the problem. It was that they were talking about the civil settlement.
That's right. And the civil settlement, Your Honor, and if I may I provide the court with the transcript of the actual briefing?
Is it a transcript of what was said?
It is, Your Honor. I believe this was prepared by our office, so it's not an official transcript in any way, but it could aid you in listening
Sure.
to the information that's contained in the URL that's listed at the top.
Any objection to that, Mr. Nelson?
I have not received a copy, so if the state has a copy for me to as well.
Certainly.
Because I assume you made that record earlier, Mr. Nelson, as in support of your motion to continue or change venue.
Right.
In that specifically Minneapolis city officials continue to talk about the case.
Correct. And it was, in the context of how it's being reported, is that the Minneapolis city attorney has specifically said that the timing of the George Floyd lawsuit settlement reflected a need to act fast.
All right. I'll accept the transcript as an aid to the actual press conference, which apparently I'll add to my nightly homework list. And we'll consider that exhibit to be part of the court exhibits for the defense motion to continue the trial or change venue. So we'll receive it as such.
Okay.
You can just give it to Mr. Schaefer. He'll mark it as court exhibit 1.
And then I would also ask, Your Honor, again, just emphasizing the importance of maintaining an accurate record. To the extent that the court is going to be relying on anything, off-the-cuff comments about something that someone may have reported in the media, that's really third-hand information. I think that if counsel is going to be making factual assertions, they need to be made as either a formal offer of proof or a declaration with supporting exhibits attached. And I don't think that the court has limited in any way defense counsel's ability to file articles, newspaper articles, or whatever kind of accounts he thinks is going to support his motion, but just simply in the middle of proceedings saying, hey, I heard that the city council is talking about this case again, without the context in which it's being spoken about, is just unfair.
Let's just stop right there. As an officer of the court, Mr. Nelson was noting something that was in progress almost. He has the right to do that. You have a right to criticize it as not being sufficiently supported by declarations and affidavits. My response to his declaration was to say it was noted, nothing more, no findings. And I would expect that he follows it up with perhaps some filings. I cannot expect Mr. Nelson to step out of these proceedings, where we've been in session since 8:30 this morning, to file affidavits to add to his record on a motion I'm going to be reading about and deciding tonight for tomorrow morning. I don't think it's fair to criticize either side. Either side. You should not be criticizing each other for noting for the record things that are happening in an emergent manner. It should be followed up. I agree with that. Good record is much better. But for an officer of the court to make a notation, he's entitled to do that. Whether he wants to just rest on that is fine. I think your answer to give me that transcript and a URL to listen to is also very appropriate, very important for me to look at these questions. But let's recognize the fact that the state has a lot of lawyers on this case who can sit outside this courtroom and start grinding out things. Mr. Nelson does not have the same level of support. How many lawyers now are admitted pro hoc vice and are working for the state on this case so far, Mr. Slisher? Is it 10, 12?
I don't have that number, Your Honor, but I do know that the Police Federation, the union, is funding the defendant's defense, and they have...
Let's not talk about that. We're not talking about how things are funded. I'm just saying, I can understand why what I'm saying is, I can understand why the state is able to produce affidavits and memos so quickly, because there are a lot of lawyers working outside this courtroom. I can't expect that Mr. Nelson would walk in this afternoon with affidavits when we've been in jury selection all day.
And
I think what we're getting into is criticizing each other's performance. Let's not do that. You do your own performance, you let the court evaluate whether it's enough. We're going to go forward, make your record, make it as good as you want to make it. I'll decide based on the record that's before me, and if it's not good enough, I'll say so. And to be honest, I'm not going to talk about this second press conference. I'm not going to talk about it. Make your submissions. I prefer now they be in writing, and we stop talking about it. I've asked Minneapolis to stop talking about it. They keep talking about it. We keep talking about it. Everybody just stop talking about it. Let me decide what the ramifications are. Are we clear on this? We're adjourned for the day. Submit your additional submissions in writing, not oral. Thank you.